Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of April's book review. I am really excited to finish sharing with you the other 5 books that I read through the month of April. 2 of them are from the Throne of Glass series, 2 of them I borrowed from, one of the other ones I borrowed from the library. One of them has been on my to-be-read shelf for 2 years, and I finally am able to cross that off my list, which is really exciting. So let's go ahead and just get started with the rest of my books. If you're new here, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I post book review vlogs once a month on the first Friday of every month. The next one will be out on June the 7th. And then throughout the month, I do other book related content talking about books that I'm reading. And there is some exciting stuff in the works for this channel. So without any further ado and any more extra words on my part, let's get started with the other half of my book review. We are going to start with the book that has been on my to-be-read shelf for 2 years. I bought this book as a new release and it has been sitting there ever since. We are going to discuss briefly Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. This book, I don't know if you'd remember, but I had actually intended to read this book in the month of March, and it just didn't happen because I got distracted by other books. I have a terrible habit of getting distracted by other books. I read too many at a time, I think, is the problem. This book is 291 pages long. And if you are familiar with Neil Gaiman's other writing, you will not be at all surprised to know that this book is fantastic. This is the collection of Norse myths. We are talking Loki, we're talking Thor, and the All-Father. All of your favorite bits and pieces of the movies that have been done by Marvel. I think most of us have probably seen, or at least seen previews of Thor and the associated videos, and this is the book version of that, though, as always, the book is better than the movie. I am already a big fan of fairy tales and legends and myths, and so that is why I picked up this book to start with, because that is just a genre of books that I just really enjoy reading. And this book was exactly what I was expecting it to be. I have read myths before. This book, though, I think was probably the most in-depth collection, most whole collection that I have read. I think that he did a fantastic job doing the research. He talks a little bit about that in the introduction, the amount of research that went into this book, where he got his information from, and how he chose to compile it, which I always think is really interesting because these are not stories that would have ever been written down. These are stories that would have been talked about around campfires in small villages, and it was all an oral history of their gods and of their legends and their myths. And to find a written down copy would have been incredibly rare, or probably not even possible. So I'm sure there's stuff that's missing out of this book because you're never going to find all of it because it was not a written down history. I think there is some literary license taken with this book, but that's kind of just to be expected with this kind of a compilation. But I think that he does a very nice job with it. He doesn't do outlandish things. He doesn't really take the story very far from where I already knew that it was going to be. So these are this is presented as a collection of short stories, and they kind of are in sequential order of kind of the introduction and how people came to be to the end, to the Ragnarok at the end. So it kind of covers the whole span of life on Earth, I guess, as they would say. So if you enjoy that kind of thing like I do, like fairy tales and legends and fables and things like that, I think that you would probably enjoy this book as well. Just keep in mind, though, that this is his version of them, and it may not be like the other versions you have read, and that doesn't make them better and it doesn't make them worse. It's just what his research and how he has chosen to put the stories together. I read 6 young adult fantasy fiction novels throughout the month of April, 5 of which came from the same series as I mentioned in the previous review video. And the other one is one that I don't even know how to explain this book. I love it. I really love it. The first book in this series, The Last Namsara, I reviewed in my March book review, and this book is equally as good. I love this book. Kristen Cicerelli, she is Canadian. She is awesome. She is just fantastic. She has a fantastic imagination, and I just love her stories. This book is 379 pages long, and it is labeled as the second in the Iskari series. The Iskari is what a group of the people are called in the book. I am already excited, and I'm already looking forward to book number 3 in this series, which is set to be released in the middle of November of this year. So that is more than 6 months away, but I am already totally excited, and I can hardly wait for that book to come out. I have already pre-ordered my copy, which I almost never do, but I am excited to have that book. I went into this book expecting it to kind of pick up immediately after or shortly after the end of The Last Namsara. So I was expecting to learn more about Asha and her dragon, and there is no mention of her in this book until the last chapter. We don't even hear from her, we don't see her in this book at all. And I was a little surprised by that. I expected that that's the way the book would go, but in a twist of events, we are taken off in a completely opposite direction from what I thought. Though it was a surprise that happened, I thought it was masterfully done. She did a wonderful job. So we actually pick up this book when we are talking about Asha's brother Dax and his wife Roa. And this book is really more about Roa. It's really not even about Dax so much. We don't even really hear a lot from him. Dax is now the king and has married Roa, who is a scrublander who is not from his city, to kind of unite the people. That they used to be a united people. They were factioned off, and now they're trying to unite the people again. This book gives us a lot of insight into Roa and her upbringing and to the people where she lived. And like I said, we don't see a lot of Dax in this book, but what we do see of him had me super irritated with him for the majority of the book. I was really annoyed at him for some of the choices that it was implied that he was making and some of the actions that it was implied that he was engaging in. There is an interesting resolution in this book, and I don't want to give the story away. I don't want to give spoilers, but the ending of this book is not at all what I was expecting. As the story was progressing, I thought we were headed in a direction, but near the end, it like takes a hard left and away we go off in a completely opposite direction. So that is what's kind of made me really excited to see what happens in the next book. The next book is called The Skyweaver, and again, it's due out in August. That's wrong. It's due out in November of this year. So I'm excited to grab that one. I'm excited to see where she is going to take the story. Now we have The Last Namsara as a story over here, and The Caged Queen is not talking about Asha like I thought it was. It's actually talking about Roa, and we have that storyline here, and right at the very end they kind of come together, and now I have no idea what to even expect from the book called The Skyweaver. I have no idea what the story is going to do, so I'm really interested to grab that when it comes out in November. The next book that I want to talk about is the last book that I borrowed from the library in the month of April, and I heard a lot of buzz about this book. I put this book on hold shortly after its release date. I put it on hold in September of 2018, and I just barely got my hands on it in April. So for 5 months, I waited on hold. That's more than 5 months. I waited over 6 months to get my hands on this book. And I figured that this book was going to be so amazing and so incredibly written that there was a reason it took 6 months for me to get my hands on this book. It's 326 pages long. Let me show it to you. I've been talking about it. I need to show it to you. Vox. But it's 326 pages. And this book was, I don't know. I've read some mixed reviews about this book. I don't read reviews until after I've read the book myself. And as I was reading some of the reviews, I found myself nodding along. I'm like, yes, I just couldn't put my finger on what it was about this book that was bugging me until I read some other reviews, and other people were able to articulate some of the flaws in this book. And so I want to share some of that with you. These words are all my own. I am not plagiarizing. I am not taking other people's opinions and passing them off as my own. They just help me find the words to explain what I was thinking already. So there is a lot of books on the market that talk about a dystopian United States, and this book is one of those books. It talks about a fundamentalist group that has gained control of the government and has marginalized women in a way that is the most scary thing I can think of. Women are limited in the amount of words they can use, and they wear this bracelet that will zap them if they go over their limit. That's kind of the overall premise of the book. So this book had the potential to be absolutely fascinating, I think. And I think that's what caught my attention. And I was expecting the book to just blow me out of the water because it seemed to be so popular. Everyone seemed to be reading this book. This book does have some very good parts. So it does start out very, very well. And it is setting the stage for a story that I was hoping would be absolutely incredible. But when I finished the book, I didn't think that way anymore. So it took me a while to kind of figure out why it was that I felt the book was kind of a little bit of a letdown in the second half of the book. And after thinking about it for a while, and I read some other reviews, and I kind of came to the opinion that the end was just too rushed. It was too quick. The resolution of the book was just too fast. I think that it was just too easy. It was interesting to me that though this book was about women and about freeing women from the regime that had silenced them, ultimately it was a male character who provided the tools to triumph, I guess, or to win. And I thought that was odd. I thought that it was odd that if this was a book about women and a book about women saving other women, that a male character played a large role in that resolution. So I don't know, it just kind of seemed a little bit weird. The main character's name is Jean, and I think she showed some backbone and some fire, and she clearly showed that she was able to stand up and fight for something that was important to her and important to her entire country. But one thing that I thought was really strange is at the end of the book, Jean is given the opportunity to flee the country. She is able to take her children and her colleague, and she takes it. So it was just really interesting that she worked so hard to free women, and she helped cause this huge uproar and this huge change in her country, and then she just leaves. And I thought that was kind of strange. But maybe it makes sense. I'm not really sure. I just thought that was kind of an odd way for the book to end. I think that there was a love affair that happened in this book that was completely unnecessary. It didn't add anything to the story for me, and it actually made me like her a lot less as a protagonist than I think I would have if she had been structured a little bit. If it had been different, I don't know. Maybe that's just me being judgmental, but I just thought it was completely unnecessary to the book, and I don't think that it improved the story in any way. I think that when you are dealing with the topic of extreme sexism and extreme rules and regulations on a gender in society, you have to be really careful, and if you're going to tackle that topic in a book, you're going to have to do a really good job. And I don't think that this book quite got there. I don't think that it was quite what it could have been. It's 326 pages long, and I think that it could have been longer, or it should have been better structured to have more of a story. The ending was, I think I said this already, but the ending was too quick. It was too easy, and it just kind of felt wishy-washy, and then the story was over. So I don't know that I would really recommend this book to a lot of people. It just didn't seem to get there. There's other dystopian books that are so much better. I saw some comparisons online of people comparing this to The Handmaid's Tale, which I think is totally not even. If you have read The Handmaid's Tale, you understand what good writing looks like and how to talk about topics like this. This book is nothing like that. It kind of has a little bit of an element, a little bit of a feel like it's similar to The Handmaid's Tale, but there is literally no comparison. If I were to offer you the choice between this book and The Handmaid's Tale, it wouldn't even be a choice. I would offer you The Handmaid's Tale. That is a far better book. Speaking of The Handmaid's Tale very quickly, there is a sequel coming out in September to that book. and I am totally excited. I am really looking forward to that. So that's just like a tangent, but that is something you can be sure that I'm going to be reading and sharing with you in the fall. All right, so that brings us to the final 2 books that I've read for the month of April, and I'm going to review them kind of together. They are from the Throne of Glass series. The first one is Heir of Fire, and the other one is Queen of Shadows. Heir of Fire is what I'm calling the 4th book in the series, Throne of Glass series. I label the Assassin's Blade, the novellas, I label that as book number 1. So I am calling this book number 4. The Heir of Fire finds us and Celaena in a different country. She has crossed the ocean and she is in a different country. She was sent there by the king, and she's there to assassinate that country's king and their prince. Now, I don't want to give away too much if you haven't read this book, so be aware that there is probably going to be some spoilers in this section of the video, just because I can't explain these 2 books well enough without hinting at some of the things that occur and some of the things that happen in this book and in the next book. And I apologize. I don't like it when people spoil books for me, and that is not my intention. But just be aware there may be some things that are a little bit spoilers, but I will try to keep the best parts of the plot to myself. Until you've read it and then you want to discuss it with me, I'd love to. One thing that I have to kind of spoil in order to explain this book really well is that in the country that Celaena finds herself, she finds that magic is still there. Magic is still free. And we find out at the end of book 3, Crown of Midnight, we found out at the end of that book that Celaena is actually a demi-fae. She is a descendant of King Brannon, who was the Fae King of Terrasen, and she is demi-fae, so she has magical powers, and her power is fire. And I apologize that is all huge spoiler. But if you have read the first couple of books, you would have already known all of that. So if you don't want to hear any more spoilers or me give anything else away, stop the video, go read the books, and then come back and talk to me about it. In the first part of this book, we kind of see Celaena wandering around. She's a little bit aimless, and she's not fulfilling her job as an assassin as we would expect her to. She underwent quite a change in Crown of Midnight and has become a little bit of a different person. And I actually really like her. I actually like her a lot more in this book than in the previous books. I'm just liking her more and more. Previous books were all around 400 pages, a little more than 400 pages. And this one is 562. So there is a lot more to this book than the previous books. And I thought that was really interesting that suddenly it gets so much longer. So this first bit of the book, as I said, that she's kind of lost and a little bit wandering, which is different than the way the other books start. This is not a side of Celaena that we have seen before. And it is explained really well in the book why, and it's explained really well in the book how she's dealing with some of the things that occurred and happened in Crown of Midnight. So because she's in a completely different country in Heir of Fire, we get to meet a whole book of new people. So the entire cast, aside from Celaena, is just about new in this book. This book jumps back and forth. We do hear from Chaol, we do hear from the Prince Dorian, and we do hear more from the witches in this book as well. And so we've got all of these plot lines that are kind of running parallel to one another throughout this book. But this book really gives us a lot of Celaena and what she does in this other country. One person that she meets in this book, his name is Rowan, and he is also a demi-fae, and he's considered a prince, and he serves the queen. Let's see if I get this correctly. So the queen that Rowan serves is a sister to Celaena's ancestor. I really liked Rowan. I think he's a fantastic character. If this book was ever turned into a movie, I have some suggestions of who could play that role, if anyone would like my opinion on that. I think we find Celaena a little bit aimless in this book because this is really the first time that she's free to kind of do her own thing. She doesn't have an overlord, she doesn't have a king, she doesn't have anyone kind of telling her where to go and be during this book. She's kind of been sent away. In Crown of Midnight, Chaol engineered her being sent here for her protection, because he found out some things about her, which I'm not going to spoil. You'll have to read that book to find out. Well, actually, I do have to spoil it a little bit, because in this book, we know that Celaena Sardothian is not actually her name. We find out her true name, her true heritage, and the reason why Queen Maeve has such an interest in her. This book is so well written, and there was a lot of information and a lot of things that happened in this book. We find a lot of stuff. It answers a lot of the questions that I've had for the previous 3 books. It gives us a lot of insight into Celaena as a person, and where, you know, you can kind of feel where the book is heading towards some big cataclysmic, massive war is looming somewhere in the future of the series. I can kind of feel that that's coming. We do get to meet a lot of new characters in this book. I think Rowan is a great character, and his role in helping Celaena train so that she can go and see Queen Maeve was really good. The interplay between the characters was really good. The whole of this book is this one this few months in time where Celaena has been set away, and she's training, and she's learning how to use her powers and learning how to control her powers and learning about herself in a magical way, so that she can maybe one day take her place as the queen of... Oh, I just gave it away. I don't know. Did I even make any sense? Like, I don't even know if I made any sense, but if you enjoyed The Throne of Glass at all, if you've read The Throne of Glass at all, I mean, I'm way behind here. I mean, these books have been out since 2014, 2015, so I'm way behind. So all of you have probably already read these books. So if you'd like to discuss these books further, start a thread in the comments and let's have a discussion about these books. So let's just really quickly talk about then The Queen of Shadows. I was surprised that Heir of Fire was so much longer than the other books, but this book is 100 pages even longer than that book. So this is 648 pages, and that is a lot of pages to put into a novel. If you are going to talk for 650 pages about one person or about a set of characters, you really have to know what you're talking about, and you really have to use that time to make your story interesting enough that because people are not going to turn 648 pages if your characters are wishy-washy and weak and boring. So this whole world that has been created for the Throne of Glass, I don't find it any of those things. I don't find it boring whatsoever. I think these books have just really captured my attention, and I am just loving them so much. I don't really mind books that are this long as, like I mentioned, they need to be this long. If you can tell the story in 300 pages, don't give me a 450-page book. So this book uses all 648 pages to tell a very good story. I think this is, it's just fantastic the way that she has brought the story and the storylines. Like I mentioned in the previous books, we have these parallel storylines occurring, and she's kind of brought them closer together. They haven't really crashed into one another just yet, but they have been brought a lot closer together. We hear a lot from the Iron Teeth witches in this book. Now that we know who Celaena really is, and she's actually Aelin, that's her actual name, we see her really step into her true identity in this book. We see her accept the fact that she is going to be the Queen of Terrasen. We see her really step into that role and step into believing in herself and in her magic. So in this book, we see her leave Wendlin, and she's going back to Adarlan, and she is going there to kill the king. That's kind of her main goal. She really dislikes the king. I think everyone who reads this book really dislikes the king. I think he's a terrible person. But we've learned some things about the king in this book that you wouldn't have known. Wouldn't know before you read this book. We do find now that Chaol is been kicked out of the castle. We learn some things about Prince Dorian that kind of make me sad. But we see them all eventually come together in the most unlikely way. We see that the Rifthold is attacked actually by the by the witches, by the iron, the Rifthold is attacked by the Iron Teeth witches, and we see these friends reunited and fighting for one another and succeeding. Spoiler alert. Sorry. One thing that I'm really interested in is the storyline talking about the Iron Teeth witches. And I am really interested to know whether or not Manon Blackbeak is ever going to stand up to her grandmother and either walk away or resign or stab her in the throat. Like, I'm not even really sure what to expect, but I'm wondering like what is going to happen there, because that is kind of like a minor side storyline that's just really caught my attention. And when she's going to stab the Yellow Legs heir, that's another thing that I want to know, is that she seems to be softening in a lot of ways, and she's not really a main character. She's a supporting character, but I think that Manon Blackbeak has a big role to play in the future books. It just kind of feels like there is something building there. There are so many storylines that are taking place in this book. We see some of them come together with the attack on the Rifthold, and we see them diverge again as the witches go one way, Aelin and her court go another way. Prince Dorian is left behind in the Rifthold. Though the storylines come together in a good way, they mostly come together, they kind of diverge again and take us in multiple ways. But there was a new little storyline introduced in here that's kind of weaved its way through the story. It's not mentioned a whole lot in this book, so maybe we'll hear more about it in future books, but there is new characters and a new kind of subplot that is developing in this book as well. Overall, it has been the most fantastic reading month for me. I am a little amazed that I got through 11 books. Thank you so much for watching the second half of my book review. I know that was long and I said a lot of words, and I hope that it was helpful and that you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel so that we can continue to connect over bookish things and have a conversation around the books that I've discussed today. Also, if you could just leave comments about book suggestions. I am really interested in book suggestions. Specifically this time, I would love to hear any graphic novel suggestions that you may have. Books that you've really liked or books that you think are really awesome. Thanks for watching.